time. I'll start with saying that in consultation with the Secretariat, we have adjusted the schedule for this afternoon, the working program. And if you look at the bottom of the screen projected, it will show you the items that we plan to discuss this afternoon: 68.1, 68.2, 38.1, 38.2, 53, 54, 55, 67.1, 67.2, 75, 76, 81, 79, 82, 83. If we make it through all of these, that is my goal, we will be caught up. So I'm looking for everybody to be concise, yet still speak and discuss if needed, but really try to get through this working program so we have a number of COM documents coming to us tomorrow. Okay, so with that, I will turn to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to make one housekeeping announcement. I have been informed by the audio technicians that some of the sound output is weak, and especially when you actually have your laptop in front of you and if the microphone's blocking. So we would just like to plead that you do speak closer to the microphone so that everybody has a good audio. Thank you.
And with that, I will begin with document 68.1, Saiga Antelope's decision 19.216, and I will turn to Kazakhstan to introduce their document.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The document 68.1 highlights developments in Saiga conservation and trade under CITES and CMS, including CITES decisions, the CMS work program and its revision. The document draws attention of the parties to the vision of the CMS work program for Saiga to restore Saiga population to the point that sustainable use can again be considered. The document outlines Kazakhstan's progress in implementing CITES decisions, disclosed information about stockpiles of Saiga horns in Kazakhstan, provides the updated information about Saiga population in Kazakhstan. It also covers efforts of Kazakhstan to address illegal trade in Saiga and the competition between Saiga and local farmers due to the increase in the number of Saiga in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is planning to host the 5th meeting of signatures of Saiga MOU of the CMS in Astana in March 2025. This meeting is quite important for the discussion of the status of Saiga. Kazakhstan submitted the document 68.1 containing some recommendations. After further consideration and taking into consideration the document by the Secretariat, we have revised our recommendations to remove possible overlap. We are kindly requesting to revise point 21 little a by following wording. Take into consideration the information in document 68.1. Replace points 21 little b to little g by the following point 21 little b and little c. Point little b. Encourage range states of the Saiga antelope and important consumer and trading countries of Saiga parts and derivatives to put in place measures to effectively manage Saiga specimen stockpiles. Point little c. To invite the Secretariat to submit draft decisions on the Saiga antelope based on outcomes of the 5th meeting of Saiga MOU signatories to ensure synergy between CITES and the CMS and the joint CMS-CITES work program. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I now ask the Secretariat to introduce document SC 68.2 Rev 1.
Thank you, Chair. The document summarizes the progress of the implementation of decisions on Saiga antelopes. The Secretary reports on the patterns of legal and illegal trade in Saiga antelopes since the last report at SC 77. The plans for the next meeting of the Saiga MOU signatories, which will be held in Astana, Kazakhstan in March 2025, and the translation of stockpile management guidance into Russian. The Standing Committee is invited to take note of the document and invite the Secretariat to revise or draft new draft decisions on Saiga for submission to COP20. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to standing committee members to speak to the recommendations in 68.1 as revised in plenary by Kazakhstan and the Secretariat's recommendations in paragraph 19. So I open the floor to standing committee members. Not seeing any standing committee members wishing to speak, I open the floor to observer parties. I have China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China notes the significant achievements have been made in the conservation of the saiga antelope in Kazakhstan. The saiga population in Kazakhstan may have reached 4 million individuals. This is the result of the joint efforts of the CITES Secretariat and the range state of saiga antelope and the important consumer and trading countries. In 2023, the IUCN Red List status of saiga antelope has improved from critical endangered to near threatened. The rapid growth of saiga antelope population has brought about the issue of human-wildlife conflict. China believes that Kazakhstan's proposal to amend the relevant decision is necessary and timely. As a historical range of saiga antelopes, China is committed to restoring and expanding the saiga antelope population through increased breeding and reintroduction. China is willing to participate in this work, and also China thanks the Secretariat for its review of the trade situation of saiga antelope. China has already mentioned in its earlier statement that population status and convention status of saiga antelope have changed significantly, and it is suggested that all parties adjust the relevant CITES policies on saiga antelope on the basis of these changes. China believes that the main pressure facing saiga antelope conservation is the rapid population growth, which has led to human-wildlife conflicts. The range states of saiga antelope, including Kazakhstan, are also facing significant financial pressures. China agrees to the update of the text on decision 19213 to 19217 at the 20th Conference of the Parties and suggests that during the revision process, the range states of saiga antelope be encouraged to actively restore and expand the saiga antelope population through bilateral and multilateral cooperation and to consolidate the achievements in saiga antelope conservation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I call on the USA.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the United States, we appreciate the submission of both documents regarding the management of and trade in saiga antelope. We applaud Kazakhstan's efforts to manage its populations of saiga and secure, audit, and control its stockpiles of saiga specimens. We remain concerned regarding the lack of transparency in the management of existing stockpiles of specimens of saiga, particularly in consumer states. We join Kazakhstan in urging that range, transit, and consumer states provide information on the volume of any stockpiles and management measures in place in support of efforts to chart a path forward to support sustainable use of the species. We appreciate the Secretariat's clarification in the revised document that noting that saiga are included in Appendix 1, that parties are indeed required to report on imports of specimens of the species. With regard to the other recommendations in the two documents, we support the Standing Committee encouraging saiga range states and important consumer states of saiga parts and derivatives to report annually to the Secretariat on the level and volume of stocks and their sources in the format and within the deadline prescribed by the CITES Secretariat. We also support requesting the Secretariat on the basis of implementation of decisions 19.213 to 19.217 and the outcomes of the 5th meeting of the CMS saiga MOU signatories and status of implementation of relevant decisions to revise or draft new decisions for consideration at COP20. With regard to Kazakhstan's recommendation to establish an intersessional working group, we note that since this is the last full meeting of the Standing Committee before COP20, it would not be appropriate to establish an intersessional working group here, and we would look to the Secretariat for any suggestions on how to proceed with regard to that recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I wish to clarify, U.S. Kazakhstan has revised its recommendations, and there is no longer the suggestion of an intersessional working group. I turn to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. With regard to 68.1, the Russian Federation thanks Kazakhstan for the report and welcomes the work carried out by our colleagues. Together with our colleagues from Kazakhstan, we hold regular meetings and have planned a number of joint activities to conserve transboundary saiga populations. We have also established the Russian-Kazakhstani working group on the conservation of transboundary saiga populations. With regard to 68.2, we would like to thank the Secretariat for the report, and the Russian Federation notes that saigas have not been hunted in the Russian Federation since 1999. The saiga is listed in the Red Data Book of the Russian Federation, and there are no commercial stocks of saiga horns in Russia, which means that there is no legal domestic market, and all the associated control operations, market monitoring, etc. In the overall work on saiga conservation, it is important to take a holistic approach. This work should include both scientific work on the species and their population status, as well as measures aimed at curbing possible illegal movements, including preventive measures. Taking into account that the saiga range has clear geographical boundaries with national requirements for its protection, the possibility of derivatives of unknown origin can be reduced to zero. We express concern about the possible negative impacts of the application of the source code U on trade in saiga. The existing guidelines for the application of CITES source codes in nature general. However, the application of the U-code scheme when insufficient information is available makes it possible for the codes to be applied to saigas, which could have a negative impact on the conservation of the species and increase the risk of legalizing the illegal trade. We would like to stress the need to take all possible measures to establish the origin of saiga antelope specimens to be exported and re-exported from countries outside of the saiga range, including conducting a genetic analysis, inquiries to countries of suspected origin, and gathering sufficient evidence that the specimen was not obtained in violation of the laws of the country of origin. We express our commitment to cooperate with other range countries in relation to the saiga
Russian
conservation.
Federation, can you wrap up, please? Do you want to wrap up? You did. Okay, thank you. I turn to observer organizations. I have CMS.
Thank you, Chair. The CMS Secretariat would like to express its sincere gratitude to the government of Kazakhstan for their close engagement on saiga conservation over the past years and for offering to host the upcoming 5th meeting of signatories to the saiga MOU. This meeting will represent a key opportunity to strengthen international coordination on the conservation and management of saiga. As already mentioned by Kazakhstan, in 2023, the CMS Secretariat facilitated the development and adoption of the saiga conservation and management strategy for Kazakhstan upon the request of the Kazakh government with funding from Germany, marking an important milestone in the efforts to address human-wildlife conflicts related to growing saiga populations and land use change. We recognize that the government of Kazakhstan has encountered challenges in implementing this strategy, which were further discussed between Kazakhstan and experts in September 2024, and a way forward was agreed on. The strategy itself in that meeting was not adjusted, but remains still to be adopted within the Kazakh government. And we look forward to hearing from the government of Kazakhstan at the upcoming SaigaMOS 5 about the progress in implementing the strategy, which is essential when considering opening sustainable use of Saiga. CMS supports the recommendations put forward in the document. In that regard, we also believe that it would be essential to consider the CMS report, the sustainable use of the Saiga antelopes, perspectives and prospects, as well as the government-endorsed strategy for conservation and management of Saiga antelopes in Kazakhstan, which was endorsed by the Saiga MOU signatory states. Additionally, we believe that the involvement of local communities in migratory species conservation should align with the 10 key guiding principles on community engagement.
Can I ask you to please wrap up?
Adopted by CMS COP14. Lastly, we look forward to working with the CITES Secretariat on including the recommendations coming out of the Saiga MOS 5 in developing decisions for CITES COP20. Thank you, Chair.
I have one more observer organization, and then I'll turn back to Kazakhstan and try to wrap this up. So I have Fauna and Flora International.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of Fauna and Flora, WCS, Traffic, and EIA. We highly appreciate the submission of the document and conservation efforts of Kazakhstan that led to the remarkable recovery of Saiga. We commend Kazakhstan's transparency in disclosing stockpile volume and sources, setting a strong example. We encourage the Standing Committee to recommend other range states and trading countries to report such information to the Secretariat. While we recognize the suggestion to defer making recommendations like those in the document until the Saiga MOU meeting, we believe the working group for focused intersessional dialogue of range states, trading countries, and other stakeholders would complement discussion at the Saiga MOU meeting, as well as be invaluable for developing tailored solutions for Saiga conservation and trade, drawing on successful CITES precedents. We hope such a dialogue can be pursued in the near future. In relation to effective stockpile management, we encourage important Saiga consumer and trading parties to take the necessary regulatory measures to allow for transparent monitoring and reporting for stockpiles of Saiga specimens. Lastly, with the revision of the Saiga work program, we suggest that Standing Committee recommends CITES and CMS Secretariats to collaborate on its update in line with CMS-CITES joint work program. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Kazakhstan, are you still wishing to speak? I see nodding. I'll call on Kazakhstan and then I'll conclude the discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kazakhstan would like to express concerns regarding the information provided in document 68.2, noting that Saiga specimens are being traded under source codes U and O. Given the considerable age these specimens would have reached or unknown source of the samples, their occurrence in trade warrants special attention. To address potential risks, Kazakhstan suggests that the Standing Committee consider recommendation of suspension of international trade in Saiga specimens assigned with source codes U and O. Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving the floor to Kazakhstan delegation.
Thank you, and I will consult with the Secretariat how we conclude this agenda item. So I ask the Standing Committee to see if we can agree to the following. Standing Committee takes note of the information in document SC 78, document 68.1. The Standing Committee encourages range states of the Saiga antelope and important consumer and trading countries of Saiga parts and derivatives to put in place measures to effectively manage Saiga specimen stockpiles. This one is a merging of two of the recommendations. The Standing Committee invites the Secretariat to submit draft decisions on the Saiga antelope to COP20 based on the outcomes of the 5th meeting of the Saiga MOU signatories to ensuring synergy between CITES and CMS and the joint CMS-CITES work program. The status of implementations of decisions 19.213 to 19.217 on Saiga antelope and the outcome of the discussions here at SC 78. The Standing Committee takes note of the progress on the implementation of Decision 19.214, recommendation, and then the Standing Committee notes the concerns raised here relating to the use of source code UNO due to the challenges associated with making legal acquisition findings. So that would address some of the concerns that we've heard here from Kazakhstan and Russian Federation and others. So can I see if the Standing Committee agrees to these? I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the United States, may we also suggest that the Standing Committee requests the Secretariat to issue a notification to the parties seeking information regarding stockpile controls and other information concerning the management of and trade in Saiga specimens to help inform preparation of the COP20 document? Thank you.
I'm looking if the Standing Committee members can agree to that addition by the U.S. to what I read out. I'm not seeing anyone requesting to speak or negative head shaking. I'll take silence as agreement. And with that, I will conclude this agenda item. And we will move on to agenda item 38.1. Enforce report of the Secretariat, resolutions Comp 11.3, Rev Cop 19, Comp 11.8, Rev Cop 17, Comp 17.6, Rev Cop 19, Decision 19.83, and Standing Committee Document 38.1, and I'll ask the Secretariat to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. The Secretariat report on activities conducted in accordance with resolutions and decisions on various matters, including addressing corruption, addressing illicit financial flows from wildlife crime, the CITES illegal trade database and data analysis, wildlife crime linked to the internet, Tibetan antelope, and other matters. The recommendations of the Secretariat for consideration by the committee are provided in paragraph 39 of the document. This includes, amongst others, proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 17.6 Rev Cop 19 and to Resolution 11.3 Rev Cop 19 as presented in Annexes 1 and 2 respectively, and also draft decisions on wildlife crime linked to the internet presented in Annex 3 proposed for submission to COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I turn to the Standing Committee members. I have Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the Secretariat for the work on enforcement matters as well as preparing this report. At this time, at the same time, we support the recommendations provided in the document, including the proposed amendments in Resolution Conf 17.6 and Resolution Conf 11.3. I thank you.
Thank you. I now open the floor to observer parties. I have Peru.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the Secretariat for presenting this report. I would like to refer briefly to a resolution adopted by the UN Conference Against International Crime. Brazil, France, and Peru sponsored this resolution, and it was a crucial step in efforts against international wildlife crime. It set up an intergovernmental expert working group on crimes affecting the environment. And this will allow us to ensure that we can act against such crimes internationally. And this could possibly lead to an additional protocol that will allow us to have greater legislative and operational measures against this crime. Now, this is one of the threats to biodiversity. So it is clear that CITES must be involved in this effort. So having CITES involved in this resolution 12.4 would be very helpful if we can all act together to stop illegal wildlife trafficking. We need a coordinated global effort of all countries and civil society. So this resolution 12.4 of UNTOC, this UN Organization Against Corruption, and work with other international organizations will help us to ensure that we can work together to protect ecosystems and ensure that we have sustainable development for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to observer organizations. And not seeing any, I will consult with the Secretariat to conclude this agenda item. So the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations contained in paragraph 39, A, B, C, and D, and the Standing Committee notes the discussion in plenary, the addition by Peru of the resolution, the UN resolution. We would note that. Is that acceptable to the Standing Committee? I see nodding heads, so I will conclude that one. And we move on to agenda item 38.2, the International Consortium on Combating Wildlife Crime, Resolution Conf 11.13, Rev Cop 19, and it's document 38.2, Rev 1, and I turn to the Secretariat to introduce that document.
Thank you, Chair. The document provides an update as required by Resolution Conf 11.3 Rev Cov 19, non-decisions 1926, 1927, in particular through the implementation of the IQIC Vision 2030. It highlights activities, support at national, regional, and global levels, and related achievement by parties. Additional details are in the 2023 annual report, available as Information Document 1, and a further update will be provided at COP20. The Secretary notes that the project with the European Union mentioned in paragraph 33 has been finalized, and on behalf of IQIC, thanks the European Union, Monaco, United Kingdom, and the United States of America for supporting the IQIC Vision and Strategic Action Plan. The consortium also expresses its appreciation to previous donors, contributors, and partner organizations. The recommendations are in paragraph 48 of the document. Thank you, Chair.
I open the floor to Standing Committee members. I open the floor to observer parties. I have the EU.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The European Union and its member states acknowledge the important achievements made under IQIC and reaffirms its strongest support for its work. We are pleased to announce that the European Union will continue to provide financial support through a new commitment for the GUARD Wildlife Programme of €27 million. This will be implemented through IQIC partners to help combat organized wild crime globally. The EU fully supports all three recommendations and looks forward to continued collaboration in strengthening enforcement efforts to protect wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to observer organizations. I will consult with the Secretariat. So I ask the Standing Committee then if, basically I suggest the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations in paragraph 48, B, A, B, and C. Looking for some agreement, thumbs up or smiles. I have them, and therefore we can agree to that. Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item, 53, stocks and stockpiles, decision 17.170, Rev Cop 19, document 53, and I call on the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. This document has been prepared by the Secretariat in consultation with the Chair of the Committee and reports on progress on the implementation of Decision 17.170, Rev Cop 19. In paragraph 29 of the document, the Committee is invited to note the review of existing provisions on stocks and stockpiles in resolutions and decisions, consider and agree on the definition of stockpiles proposed in the paragraph C of paragraph 29 for inclusion in the CITES glossary, agree not to use the term stocks in the context of accumulated dead specimens as defined, and therefore submit amendments to 5 resolutions as set out in the annex to the document, encourage parties to use existing guidance for the effective management of stockpiles where relevant and useful, and agree that the COP17 decision can be deleted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I open the floor to Standing Committee members. On this one, we have quite a few taking the floor. So I will turn first to Poland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We thank the Secretariat for the report. We note the work conducted, the existing provisions and their implementation. We agree to not use the term stocks and use the term stockpiles instead. We express support for encouraging parties to use the existing guidance on managing stockpiles of non-perishable goods, as agreed at SC 74, specifically for ivory, rhino horn, pangolin scales, and saiga horn, and to provide feedback to the Secretariat. On the definition of stockpiles, we reiterate concerns that have not been fully addressed. As it stands, the definition does not explicitly exclude confiscated specimens held temporarily for investigations, prosecutions, or court proceedings. The definition still references, quote, in the context of CITES, which may be considered redundant. We therefore wish to propose the following amendments to the definition. So the definition would read, stockpiles refer to any quantity of accumulated dead specimens, including parts and derivatives of CITES listed species held by public or private entities, specimens included in permanent collections held by museums, scientific institutions, or individuals for non-commercial purposes, and we suggest to add new sentence, as well as seized or confiscated specimens still under an enforcement procedure are excluded from the definition. And finally, we agree with the recommendation F. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I turn to Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As for the definition of stockpile in paragraph 22, first of all, as we submitted before, since CITES is the convention about the international trade, and the convention itself doesn't include the concept of stockpile, management of the domestic stockpile is fundamentally beyond the mandate of CITES. From the practical implementation viewpoint, we would like to delete the privately held stockpile from the proposed general definition of stockpile. Each party needs legal basis to maintain and obtain accurate information from private sectors about their stockpile, and parties anyway can maintain and report only within the scope of the legal basis of each party. Since the convention itself doesn't cover the stockpile, the legal basis can't be realized without the specific convincing needs for each target species. So definition of the stock and for each species should be reasonably and clearly defined in each resolution regarding the target species in accordance with the convention and trading situations. For example, as for the ivory as the precedent example, in the resolution conf 10.10, concerned parties are asked to maintain and report the significant privately held stockpiles only where possible. And as stated in document 54, quote, very few parties have declared significant privately held stockpile of ivory to the Secretariat. Also, there is anecdotal evidence that such stockpile exists, quote ends. It clearly shows we need to consider more seriously about implementation. We would like to ask supporting parties' view how to obtain the accurate information and manage the private-owned stockpiles of generally CITES-listed species in general. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Oceania thanks the Secretariat for this paper and appreciates significant work completed to date on stocks and stockpiles. We agree with the removal of the word stock and concentrate on stockpiles. We also agree with recommendations in paragraph 29 and note while the documents referred to in that paragraph 29E provide useful guidance for the management of government-held stockpiles or specimens of Appendix 1 species. The guidance, as Japan has noted, does not necessarily apply so well to the distinct challenges concerning commercially held stockpiles of non-perishable products. And in our region, we think of those of marine taxa, such as giant clamshells, dried shark fins, dried sea cucumbers and seahorses. We also note that the issue of commercial stockpiles has been identified as potentially requiring further work for both sharks and seahorses in docs 70.1 and 71.1 of this meeting, and that little information on the management of commercial stockpiles of dried specimens of marine species is available to parties. Oceania would like to acknowledge that Traffic has published recommendations on the management of commercial stockpiles of shark fins and believe this is a good start to developing a consistent approach on this matter. We would like to request that parties consider whether a new decision at COP20 to develop guidelines for the management of commercial stockpiles of Appendix 2 listed marine species would be beneficial, or it could be even wider than just marine species. Finally, we suggest an amendment to the proposed definition of stockpile in paragraph 22 of this document, and it is discussed in paragraph 18, and this amendment would also be in addition to the amendment proposed by the EU. And so we propose to replace the word accumulated with the word stored in the first line, because a stockpile may be derived from a one-off acquisition, could be a single specimen as a result of a confiscation, or of multiple specimens, rather than the gradual build-up of specimens, which is the usual dictionary definition of accumulated. The word store conveys the concept of a consolidation of specimens in some sort of storage facility, whether accumulated or from one-off acquisition. So we would start the definition off by saying, we would, in the context of CITES, the word stockpile, stocks and stockpiles are used interchangeably to refer to any volume or number of stored dead specimens of CITES listed species, etc. And then that would run into the change that the EU has proposed. Thank you.
I have Brazil.
Muchas gracias, señora la presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We are speaking on behalf of the Central, South America and Caribbean region, and we would like to ask that the term in Spanish be used to have existencias, stocks, instead of reservas, because in Article 13 in English we see reservation, and that is more linked to compliance. So we are in agreement with the English term stockpiles, and it seemed very interesting, and we supported the idea that has been put forward by New Zealand. And we would like to ask for a small amendment in paragraph 29C to add the word legally, so the text would be in Spanish. In the context of CITES, stockpiles refer to any quantity of dead specimens, and there we would add legally accumulated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I turn to the UK.
Thank you, Chair. We too can agree to the recommendations in paragraph 29, but I'm afraid we have further adjustments to propose to paragraph C, but they may fit comfortably with the others that have been proposed so far. In the document, it refers to permanent collections held by museums, and it should say or scientific institutions, and we would like to add after that for non-commercial purposes, and then to continue or by individuals as personal or household effects in the definition. We have provided these amendments to the Secretariat. I hope those are helpful. In addition, we'd just like to, like other parties, mention that we have raised some other concerns about the definition and so on, which haven't been taken into account in either this definition or the further discussions. And we recognise some of the further elements that have been raised by parties in the discussion today. So, but I'll leave you there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I turn to Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We consider the definition proposed in paragraph 29C of Doc 53 as much improved, but suggest the following amendments as proposed in Info Doc 46, paragraph 3, submitted by Benin. 1. Delete accumulated, because even one large seizure might result in a party holding a stockpile of CITES listed specimen. The proposal by New Zealand would be more acceptable. 2. Delete museums, because excluding them from the definition could enable leakage of specimen into trade. 3. Add for non-commercial purposes after scientific institutions to clarify that the exception applies only to non-commercially held specimens. After individuals, add as personal and household effects, and delete for non-commercial purposes, so that large stockpiles held by individuals are not excluded. At the end, add and for specimens of species listed in Appendix 1, not to be used commercially, to make it clearer that Appendix 1 species can only be disposed of non-commercially. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And then I have the USA, and then I'll open up to observer parties, but USA.
Thank you, Chair. The United States, speaking on behalf of the North America region, thanks the Secretariat and the parties for their work on this issue and supports the recommendations in the document. We note that there is a typographical error in the definition in paragraph 22 and 29C of the document. The word derivatives should be replaced with derivatives. We concur that stockpiles refers to any quantity of accumulated dead specimens, including parts and derivatives of CITES-listed species held by private or public entities. We support encouraging the parties to use the practical guidance document as outlined in 29 Section E, and to consider whether additional guidance on management and controls of stockpiles of timber tree species is needed, and if appropriate, develop such guidance with the assistance of the CITES Secretariat, as it seems like this work may help some challenges faced by parties related to timber tree species. Finally, we do not support Benin's edits contained in IMFDOC 46, and we would like to ask if we could hear Poland's proposed edits again. Thank you, Chair.
Before I go to Poland, Poland, can you read your edit one more time so everyone's clear?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. So our proposed definition text would read, we cross out the first phrase, so in the context of CITES is out, and then we'll start with stockpiles refer to any quantity of accumulated dead specimens, including parts and derivatives of CITES-listed species held by public or private entities. Specimens included in permanent collections held by museums, scientific institutions, or individuals for non-commercial purposes. And now we add new sentence, as well as seized or confiscated specimens still under an enforcement procedure are excluded from the definition. Thank you, Madam Chair. And as for, if I can come back and refer to Brazil's proposal on adding this legally accumulated in this definition, I think that at the present we wouldn't be ready to support that. And as for the Kenyan proposal, I think that we will be open for that. Thank you.
Thank you, and now I'll open to parties. I've got Benin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for having prepared this document and for the efforts that were made by the Standing Committee and parties to set up a clear definition of the term stocks and stockpiles in English. And we have submitted a document, an information document 46, with comments in 9C. And as New Zealand and Kenya have said, we propose that we remove the word accumulated because that talks about a progressive or continuous collection. And whilst it may be true, it could also be a situation of a single seizure. And on the second point, that we have to think about not that this shouldn't be applied to and it should be applied to the scientific institutions and so forth, and it should be for non-commercial purposes and not by individuals for personal and domestic use. So we suggest that we remove museums from this section, and that stocks can only be moved, or specimens from stocks can only be removed for non-commercial purposes. Thank you.
The chair has several parties wanting to speak. I think we've had some discussion on this, mostly on the definition, and there seems to be two views emerging from the definition. And so maybe you can try to align yourself with some of the amendments that you've heard in your subsequent interventions, because I am cognizant of the time. And so I will call on Israel.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, we align ourselves with the comments by Kenya and Benin on the changes. We don't support the addition by Brazil. As far as the Spanish word to use for stockpiles, of course, we have no way of determining which one we would prefer, but on the other aspects of their intervention, we don't agree. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China concur with Japan's amendment on the definition of stockpiles. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Botswana.
Thank you, Chair. We wish to align ourselves with the definition proposed by Japan.
Thank you. I have the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. I have 2 points. First, regarding paragraph 12b, we would like to draw your attention that back in October 2023, the Russian Federation submitted information on the management of Saiga antelope stocks in the Russian Federation to the Secretariat. This information was included in document SC 77-INF-16 on the 1st November 2023. However, it is not reflected in paragraph 12 of this document 53. So the Russian Federation requests that this be taken note of and included in paragraph 12 on Saiga management. And the second point, regarding the definition of stockpiles proposed in para 22, we find it slightly incomplete and there's room for improvement. After the words public and private entities, we would add for specific purposes and with established origin. So the definition should specify the purposes for which the stock is being held and make it mandatory to identify the source of origin in addition to labeling. And we also support the proposal made by Poland for the second sentence. Specimens seized from possible illegal circulation before their final transfer into the possession of the government cannot be considered as stocks. Within the course of administrative or criminal investigations, such seized specimens are material evidence, and the final decision can be made based on the results of these investigations. And there are cases when the specimens are actually returned to the legal owner. So that's the reason why we think the Polish proposal makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 2 more parties wishing to speak, and I'm closing on observer parties after they speak. Niger.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Niger supports the amendment proposal made by Benin, and we also support Kenya's statement. We also recommend that we remove the word museum from the document. Thank you.
I have Nigeria, and that will be it for observer parties, and then I go back to one standing committee member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nigeria aligns with Benin amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. USA?
Thank you, Chair. The North American region aligns with Poland's amendments. Thank you.
I will open up to observer organizations, and I have several. I will try to pick 2. I have IWMC.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just simply, I would like to suggest that there's a neoplasm in the definition, because in the convention we have the definition there. Thank you.
I have the Center for Biological Diversity, and then I will close the discussion.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of the Center for Biological Diversity and 13 NGOs whose names have been provided to the Secretariat. We thank the Secretariat and the parties for their work to clarify the meaning of stockpiles as used at CITES. We support the further clarifying amendments as proposed in INF-Doc 46 by Benin. We stress the need to remove commercially held stockpiles and museums from the exemption in the definition, and to make clear that Appendix 1 specimens can only be disposed of through non-commercial means. A clear definition is important, but it must be the first step toward inventorying and reporting on stockpiles in order to prevent the leakage of specimens from stockpiles, which is a serious concern for many CITES-listed species. Thank you.
Thank you, and with that, I'm going to conclude the discussion and consult with the Secretariat. I thank the Russian Federation for their point on the SIGA, and so for that document, we will note the comments made by Brazil, UK, New Zealand, Kenya, Russian Federation, and others. So I hope that addresses your concern on the SIGA. And now back to the stock and stockpiles document. I'm going to put this forward to what I heard agreement on. The Standing Committee agrees to the recommendation in paragraph 29, A, B, and A, B, D, E, and F. And essentially, I will come back to the definition, but I want to see if I have agreement on A, B, D, E, F. I didn't hear any. I heard support for the guidance, and so I'm looking for A, B, D, E, F. So I'm looking for nodding heads. I see nodding heads. So we have that. And now we come back to what the most of the discussion centered on was on the definition. And I know this has been discussed at several meetings. This is probably the closest we've ever come to maybe having a common understanding or a compromise. So I will read out and get reactions to this and see if this can fly. So basically, the Standing Committee would agree on the definition of stockpiles and requests the Secretariat to put it in the glossary. We would use stockpiles, not stocks. And the definition would read as follows. Well, I'll actually ask the Secretariat to read it because the print's a little small, but.
Thank you, Chair. So the definition to be included in the CITES glossary would read, stockpiles refer to any quantity of stored dead specimens, including parts and derivatives, of CITES-listed species held by public or private entities, specimens included in permanent collections held by scientific institutions for non-commercial purposes or by individuals as personal and household effects, as well as seized or confiscated specimens still under an enforcement procedure, are excluded from the definition. In general, provisions related to stockpiles in CITES resolutions and decisions are intended to ensure that these are secured, managed, and disposed of in such a way that the specimens would not enter or re-enter illegal trade, and for specimens of species listed in Appendix 1 not to be used commercially.
Do you want to hear it one more time? Yes, I see nodding heads, so one more time. Thank you, Secretariat.
So the definition to be included in the CITES glossary would read, stockpiles refer to any quantity of stored dead specimens, including parts and derivatives, of CITES-listed species held by public or private entities. Specimens included in permanent collections held by scientific institutions for non-commercial purposes or by individuals as personal or household effects, as well as seized or confiscated specimens still under an enforcement procedure, are excluded from the definition. And at the very end, add the proposal by Benin and others, and for specimens of species listed in Appendix 1 not to be used commercially.
So I know it's difficult because you don't have it on a piece of paper. I'm looking to the Standing Committee for some reactions. I have Japan.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. The definition just mentioned doesn't include any essence. What I may described, it may have many problems for the implementation when it is implemented, because usually the government doesn't have the authority to manage and have data from the private-owned stockpiles as general. Yeah, of course, for some specific species, if the convincing needs are provided, of course it can be, but in general, it's difficult to implement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Oceania would agree with the definition you read out, although I suppose the question in my mind is that I think many museums would consider the scientific institutions, and so I'm not sure that we've actually got rid of museums.
Absolutely not. Yeah, blew it. I turn to Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think we are very close, as you said, to an agreement. We think it's really important to have the word legally. This is not just a proposition of Brazil. This is a proposition that is putting forward by the whole region, South America, Central America, and Caribbean. So I would kindly ask you to take that into the consideration, because there are many countries in those regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I am going to limit this discussion to Standing Committee members because they're the ones agreeing here. So, Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kenya agrees with the definition as revised. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, I think we're really close. I do want to point out that the Standing Committee agreeing to this basically, yeah. what we can do, because I think we are so close to, if we can address Brazil's concern. I've heard Kenya. I think we're close. And so what I would suggest, rather than it going into the glossary right now, that we take this draft definition that we, as the Standing Committee, have developed and send it to COP20 for consideration. And there it can be discussed yet again more fully, but it would be helpful to start to have a definition. We've been discussing this now at several meetings with no outcome, continue to give work to the Secretariat to examine this, and we do need to make some progress on this. So I'm close on this definition. Let me consult with the Secretariat and see how we address the further concerns we just heard. I have the UK.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to say that we accept this, we'll go forward in the spirit of compromise, but just wanted to express concern that we would need to consider the removal of museums from the definition. Thank you, Chair.
Call on Poland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As well, on the museums, we would like to have the reference to the museums back in the definition. And another question, would it be possible to have a little bit more time to reflect upon this definition? I know that the time is very limited, but if not, yeah, just only a suggestion. Thank you very much.
So I will call on the Secretariat to read. Basically, what we would do, the Standing Committee agrees to submit the following draft definition to COP20 for consideration, and for inclusion in the CITES glossary. So it will go to COP20, and the definition right now that we have, knowing that there are still some concerns, but I think this is as far as we can go. Stockpiles refer to any quantity of legally stored dead specimens, including parts and derivatives of CITES-listed species held by public or private entities. Specimens included in permanent collections held by scientific institutions for non-commercial purposes or by individuals as personal or household effects, as well as seized or confiscated specimens still under enforcement procedures, are excluded from this definition. In general, provisions relate to stockpiles in CITES resolutions and decisions are intended to ensure that these secured, managed, and disposed of in a way that the specimens would not enter or re-enter illegal trade, and for specimens of species listed in Appendix 1 not to be used commercially. I see the Poland's point on scientific institutions and museums, but as New Zealand pointed out, that most museums are scientific institutions, and I guess you could determine when you use this definition if that museum, because there are private museums, qualify as scientific institutions. I think the point of Kenya was that they wanted to be sure that these private type museums that aren't using them for scientific or educational purposes would not be excluded. So that's the definition I would like to propose that we take forward, and I have reactions. So I will call on the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We can agree with the revised approach. We share some of the same current concerns as the United Kingdom, and we'll bring these concerns to COP20. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the solution, is that this is only going to COP20 now. It's not going directly in the glossary. I turn to Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We agree to the approach, and I just would like to ask the note or the comments from the parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan, for that. Yes, we will note the comments that were made here in plenary when we send the document to send the definition to the COP for their consideration. So if that is an acceptable way forward, can I see some nodding of heads or thumbs up, or at least you'll live with this for now? Okay. Thank you very much for your patience. I really think it is important to send something to the COP on this and not punt the can down the road again. All right, thank you. We now move on to document 54, stocks and stockpiles, elephant ivory, decision 18.185, Rep COP 19, Standing Committee document 78, document 54, Rev 1. And I look to the Secretariat to introduce it. I just wanted to be sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As requested, the Secretariat has published updated summary data based on the ivory stockpile inventory submitted by parties, disaggregated to regional level but not country level. Of note, in 2024, the highest number of parties reported on the stockpiles of ivory within their territory. The Secretariat also asked parties if they had modifications to the practical guidance on ivory stockpile management, and they had none. But the Elephant Protection Initiative provided additional tools that the Secretariat wanted to bring to the attention of a standing committee before including in the guidance. Going forward, the Secretariat also proposes to include some of the existing decisions in Resolution 1010 and proposes new draft decisions that look at stockpile management in general and not really focused only on ivory. And finally, on the Burundi stockpile, despite many attempts to obtain information, the Secretariat understands that Burundi is still consulting internally on this matter. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I open up this document to Standing Committee members for discussion of the recommendations in paragraph 28. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the set of draft decisions in Annex 2 and support as well the suggested changes to Resolution Conf 10.10 as presented in Annex 1, with one addition at the end of paragraph 8, merely aimed at clarifying this without, in our view, changing it on content. So the addition would be at the end of paragraph 8 in Annex 1, and it would read, aggregated country-level stockpiles can be reported by MIC or CITES as per paragraph 7E of Resolution 10.10. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. UK?
Thank you, Chair. We support the amendments to Resolution Conf 1010 and the recommendations in paragraph 28 of document 54. But we propose some minor amendments as the language currently used suggests the recommendations are referring to binding obligations. Therefore, in recommendation A, we would delete the word required at the end, towards the end. And for recommendation B, we would replace obligations of with actions they are urged to take in. This would be consistent with the language used in similar recommendations made by the 77th Standing Committee. We've submitted these to the Secretariat.
Thank you. I call on the DRC.
Merci. Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking as the regional representative for Central Africa, we would like to congratulate the Secretariat for having prepared this document. we would encourage parties to inform the Secretariat where necessary so that there is capacity building so that they are in a position to better manage their stockpiles. Central Africa has a proposal. We think the Secretariat should make a proposal to states parties with respect to material and technical support to come to the assistance of the sub-region. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Elephant Protection Foundation and others for the support that they have provided when it comes to ivory stockpile management. We would recommend that the Secretariat at the next SC meeting present a report on the lessons learned as well as the wins and the losses when it comes to the management of national ivory stockpiles. This would enable states parties to understand what we need to know and how significant these ivory stockpiles are. Further, Madam, we support the draft decisions in Annex 2 to this document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I call on Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We welcome the proposed amendments to Resolution Con 1010, reference COP19 in Annex 1 of Doc 54. We suggest one edit in the new proposed paragraph 7F, change property to non-commercially. We do not support the proposal in paragraph 28E to delete decisions 18.184 and 18.185. We want to emphasize the importance of renewing decision 18.14 paragraph A and decision 18.15 and propose an additional paragraph in decision 18.184 directing the Secretariat to present information in its report to the Standing Committee, comparing information provided by parties on disposal of ivory stockpiles as reported in annual illegal trade reports with CITES reports to CITES. If new paragraph 8 is not included in Resolution Con 1010 Decision 184B, should also be deleted. Lastly, in paragraph 28A, we propose that after, in particular, the next text should read, parties in near process, parties where ivory seizures or confiscation were reported to CITES and African elephant range states. Lastly, Kenya supports the proposals in Info Docs 47 submitted by Benin with amendments to the recommendations in paragraph 28 of Doc 54. Thank you, Chair.
I will now open the floor to observer parties, and I have Benin, and I ask you to try to be concise. Thank you.
Okay. Merci, Madam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Benin has submitted an INF Doc 47 where we make some suggestions. We support the amendments to Conf 1010 Rev Cop 19 in the annex to document 54 with one amendment. We should specify that these stockpiles should be managed non-commercially. So instead of properly in 7F in Annex 1, non-commercially. That will make the language non-ambiguous. And we would also like to have the decision that that the Secretariat is proposing deleting to be renewed. That is to say 18184 and 18185. And we have some other proposals that are in our INF doc. And this includes 18184 would have a provision that would have the Secretariat providing the SC with a comparison of the party's stockpile management as it appears in their national reports with respect to the sieges that CITES has carried out. Then 28A, we have another suggestion. This is also the countries that are part of the NIAP or countries that manage stockpiles that have been seized by CITES. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Benin. That is, some of your amendments pertain to what we have right in front of us, but some are new additional amendments that I am concerned information documents are not translated into the working languages of the convention, and this is quite a lot for the Standing Committee members and others to try to digest from a discussion on the floor. I made this suggestion on some other agenda items that perhaps we work with what we have here and the suggestions made to the recommendations here, and these additional amendments, parties are free to submit documents for consideration at COP20, and perhaps the better approach on some of these additional amendments is that Benin and others may think about submitting that as a document for consideration at COP20, because I'm really concerned about trying to make those decisions here and not being able to have a working group to discuss it. So that's my suggestion on your additional amendments, and so I will now really want the decision focused on the recommendations in paragraph 28 and the amendments that we have heard to those particular recommendations. So I call on Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You took words out of my mouth with your last statements, because the amendments that are coming from Benin, we find them a bit problematic. Madam Chair, Zimbabwe takes pride in being one of the countries with what we can call a best practice in terms of stocks and stockpile management, and we've been religiously reporting on our stocks and accounting for every piece. And we always present ourselves as a country that will always welcome other parties that may want to work with us in terms of continuously improving this. We have no problem with the original amendments as they stand in paragraph 28. However, we kindly request for Kenya to repeat their suggestion, because we didn't quite grasp it, so that we can be able to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking as the United States, we thank the Secretariat for preparing this document. We support the recommendations in the document as edited by the United Kingdom, as the legally binding obligations flow from the CITES treaty text, including its appendices, rather than from the Standing Committee decisions. Thank you.
I have several West and Central African countries wishing to speak. I think I'll take the same approach that I did with some other agenda items. If you are speaking in support of Benin's amendments, we can note that in the record for future discussion, but I don't want to take interventions on if that's what you're speaking to. So if we can clear the screen. Read them out, or I'll read out who I think is wishing to speak in support of Benin, Central African Republic, Niger, and Nigeria. Do I have that correct? And Senegal. And so we will note that in the record. And then I had a request from Zambia, So I will take that one yet, and then I will consult with the Secretariat.
Zambia supports what Zimbabwe said, and we disagree with what Benin suggested. Thank you.
Yes, and I think right now we're no longer discussing the amendments put forward by Benin. I'm just trying to get the record noted that if in fact Benin decides to bring these additional amendments to the COP, they have an idea of where people have spoken on those. So I will try to go consult with the Secretariat and try to go back to where we are for the Standing Committee on these particular recommendations. All right, so this is where I think we are right now, that the Standing Committee can agree on recommendation A and B of paragraph 28, and as amended by the UK and the USA. And then essentially we have agreement on F also. So it's A, B, and F we can agree to, and then I'd like to go back to C, D, and E. On E, I have heard sort of a split equally between we keep the decisions, particularly 18.184, 18.185, and not delete these decisions, and then I've heard others who said these decisions can be deleted. So I'm looking for some guidance there. And then in terms of the draft amendments to Resolution Conf 10.10 in paragraph C, the chair has a suggestion to make to F, where we heard some concerns about just how they're disposed of, and I think we can alleviate some of those concerns if we read it as ensure that adequate funding, capacity building, and training are available to ensure ivory stockpiles are inventoried, secured, and where appropriate, disposed of consistently with the convention. So we're not getting into commercial or non-commercial, but basically consistently with the convention. So that's sort of a compromise that I think we can hopefully maybe agree to in paragraph F, or at least put forward to the COP where there'll be more discussion. I see nodding heads. And that leaves me with D and with E and the decisions and F, right? No. So we have agreement then, we could have agreement then on C with that change to the paragraph F in the amendments. And the only thing left is, do we, Standing Committee would agree on the decisions, and I really don't know what to do with them. Some want to keep them, some want to delete them, and maybe that's a decision that happens at the COP, but I look at all of you for some guidance here, Standing Committee members. I've got Kenya.
Yeah, we still, with the justification I gave, disagree with the recommendation to relate the two decisions. We think it's still very important, and these informations are required.
I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair.
Just
We
get rid of them.
support Kenya's proposal to retain the two decisions. Thank you.
So what I'm hearing is a split, and I think we would just agree to delete recommendation E and not move anything forward on E, and leave that decision, will probably come at the COP. I've got Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for clarification. Belgium requested an addition to paragraph 8 in Annex 1, and you didn't mention whether or not this was taken on board when we went back to recommendation C, which talks about the Annex 1. So we are fully on board with your suggestion on the disposed of consistently with the convention, but I didn't get from your explanation whether or not you took on board Belgium's addition. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you for keeping me on my toes. I should have read that, yes, we agree to the change in paragraph 8 made by Belgium. I didn't hear any objections to that, so my apologies for not reading that one out. So we're left with recommendation G, which I've heard no discussion of on Burundi. And so basically, the way it reads now, we would agree to request the Secretariat to continue to engage with Burundi on the status of its ivory stockpile, and if invited, conduct a technical mission to verify the current status of the Burundi stockpile and to report to the committee on its findings. So I didn't hear any objections to that recommendation, so I just want to be sure I've got nodding heads that that one also stays. Okay, then I think we can conclude this one, and we've finished this one. Thank you. Now we move on to agenda item 55, transport of live specimens, decision 19.158 and 19.159, SC 78 document 55, and I call on the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. This document provides an update on decision 19.159 on transport of live specimens. The Secretariat is pleased to announce that it has secured several digital licenses for the 2025 edition of the Live Animal Regulations of International Air Transport Association. These licenses are available to the management authorities or enforcement authorities of developing countries' CITES parties, with priority given to the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states. The Secretariat issued notification 2025/004 detailing the process for updating these licenses. We hope this initiative will enhance compliance with transport regulations for live specimens of CITES listed species among the parties. The Standing Committee is invited to agree that Decision 19.159 has been implemented and may be proposed for deletion at COP20. Thank you.
I open the floor to Standing Committee members. This is a simple recommendation, I hope. Call on the USA.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the North America region recognizes that the offer of the IATA Live Animal Regulation access of 160 licenses for developing parties is a tremendous achievement. We are grateful to the Secretariat and to Germany for making this possible. We support the recommendation to delete decision 19.159. However, we propose 2 new draft decisions to continue the work to make these regulations available to all relevant parties in order to facilitate access to enforceable regulations to the appropriate officials. These draft decisions were submitted to the Secretariat as an INFDOC. However, they have not been published yet. So I can read them as follows.
Are these additional recommendations quite lengthy? Because my concern is that they've not been translated. They'll just be translated here on the floor. And as I've said on other documents, that it may not be sufficient time for the Standing Committee members to digest them, but I will let you read them and then sort of decide how to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It is just a revision of the decision 19.159. So the new decision 20.AA directed to the Secretariat in consultation with the Standing Committee. The Secretariat shall, in consultation with the Standing Committee, work with IATA to make available, parentheses, at nominal cost or for free, end parentheses, on an annual basis to authorized representatives of management authorities and enforcement authorities as electronic or hard copies, depending on the needs of the party, those sections of the IATA live animal regulations and IATA perishable cargo regulations relevant for authorities to meet CITES obligations. 20BB, directed to the parties, governmental, intergovernmental, and non-governmental organizations and other entities. Parties, governmental, intergovernmental, and non-governmental organizations and other entities are invited to provide financial assistance to the Secretariat to support the implementation of Decision 20.AA. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, U.S. I specifically look for reactions from the Standing Committee if they're willing to accept these addendums here. And the Secretariat would like to make would like to give some guidance on this, so I turn to the Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for these comments and these draft decisions. I just would like to mention, provide an update on the requests for these licenses so far since the publication of the notification. Yep. And with little surprise, we have not received a lot of requests for accessing these regulations yet, although we have also communicated to the participants of our online workshop that we organized in March 2024. We have 160 licenses, on average 2 licenses per party, mostly for developing parties, and I think we have had 6 or 7 requests. So I would like to give that out to the Standing Committee and perhaps reconsider for the continuation of the decisions going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that clarification, Secretariat. So I'm either looking for support, but based on what we heard from the Secretariat, this might not be needed, the renewal of this decision. And so basically, if the Standing Committee, if I don't hear of anybody supporting the U.S. suggestion, I think we stick with the recommendation in paragraph 5. So I look to other Standing Committee members. I have Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to stick with the recommendation 5 in this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. I will turn to observer parties. Turn to observer organizations. I have the AZA.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is made on behalf of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, WAZA, IAZA, San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, WCS, and ZSL. We appreciate that there has been some progress in implementing Decision 19.159, particularly regarding the increased availability of the IATA live animal and perishable cargo regulations, which will especially benefit developing country parties. However, we would note that this is only a one-off availability due to generous support from a party and is not sustainable for the future, and that there has been no progress reported on making the regulations more readily available to the exporters, transporters, and importers globally who are directly responsible for their implementation. Therefore, we encourage retention of this decision until progress is made in this regard. And we don't believe the proposed revision from the North American Regional Representative adequately considers the role of non-parties. If there is no viable path forward to make the IATA live animal regulations more accessible to parties and the regulated community, we would encourage exploring the development of CITES live animal transport regulations that are transparent and accessible to all, as we already have done for non-air transport for live animals and plants. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will consult with the Secretariat and try to conclude on this one. All right, I think Standing Committee, what we can do is, I'm looking for concurrence here, that the Standing Committee agrees that Decision 19.159 has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion to the Conference of the Parties. The Standing Committee takes note of the discussion here in terms of animal transport and IATA regulations for the future. And I would also, Standing Committee, I would encourage the Standing Committee regional representatives to, based on what the Secretariat has said and the response they've had to getting this one-time offer for free, they haven't had a large response rate, that we encourage the regional representatives to reach out to their parties to make them aware of that notification and the availability of these regulations at no cost. So that's my summary of where we are. I see the U.S.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support retaining the decision as suggested by AZA. Thank you.
So now I look again to the other Standing Committee members. I had asked and not heard explicitly. I am looking for, are we retaining this decision, or can we agree that it should be deleted? So if you want to retain the decision, I ask you to speak. Otherwise, I take it that we will delete it. I have Belgium, followed by Switzerland, and then New Zealand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would ask for some clarification on the comment made by the Secretariat on the fact that there are still a lot of available licenses, and they have been extended to the participants of the working group, so also non-developing countries, or have we got that wrong? Thanks.
Secretariat, can you clarify?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So there were notification, obviously the natural notification that we have issued, and there is also an email that we have sent out to the participants of the online workshop that was organized. It's not the working group, but the online workshop that was organized in March 2024, yes.
Just wants to know if any of those developing countries, how many of them?
And also to add, we have had maybe one or two requests after that communication to the participants of the workshop. In total, there were only about 7 or 8 requests that we have received. I just wanted to also clarify that we are prioritizing the LDCs, the LLDCs, and SIDS first. And then we would, if there is not enough requests from these groups of countries, then we would reach out to send the codes to the other developing countries. Thank you.
I call on Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Switzerland does not support the proposal by the US and prefers to stick to the recommendations as they are in the present document. Thank you.
Thank you. New Zealand.
Yes, I think we would align ourselves with the United States or North American region and renew the decision.
Okay. All right, so what I've heard now is that I've got Switzerland and Kuwait who would like to keep the recommendation as is, and I have North American region and New Zealand who want to retain it. So I am trying to get some of the other standing committee members to give me their thoughts of where they want to go on this. I'm not seeing a consensus in the standing committee. Either way, I've got the Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the Dominican Republic and Brazil, we would like to see it maintained. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I guess I haven't heard yet from the European or African region on this. I don't want to have a vote here. It's really close. So does the Standing Committee agree to retain the decision as revised by the U.S.? Can we agree to that? Can I see nodding heads? I see nodding heads. And so we retain this decision as revised by the U.S.
And the U.S. shared it with us because we...
Okay, can I ask the U.S. to repeat their new decision in lieu of, we're not deleting the decision, what would your new 20XX read? I'm really cognizant we're losing time here, so please, U.S., speed it up.
Thank you, Chair. We would like clarification on if we are retaining Decision 19.159 or replacing it with 20.AA draft.
What I heard was that we wanted to replace it, and then there were others who they basically hadn't heard you, they wanted to retain it. So I think what we're talking about is replacing the current 19.159 with your new suggested text for 20AA, which seemed to have support.
Okay. 20.AA, directed to the Secretariat in consultation with the Standing Committee. The Secretariat shall, in consultation with the Standing Committee, work with IATA to make available, at nominal cost or for free, on an annual basis, to authorized representatives of management authorities and enforcement authorities as electronic or hard copies, depending on the needs of the party, those sections of the IATA live animal regulations and IATA perishable cargo regulations relevant for authorities to meet CITES obligations. That's 20AA.
Thank you, that's clear. So I look to the Standing Committee for nodding heads or thumbs up or smiles that we will go forward with this decision to the COP. I see that, and we will. Thank you. Brings us to the last agenda item from the morning, or the afternoon. Anyway, document 67.1 is on pangolins, decision 19.204, and I turn to, there's a report of the Animals Committee, and I turn to the Animals Committee Chair to introduce this document.
Thank you, Chair. At COP19, parties adopted a set of decisions with the aim to encourage range states of pangolins to take urgent steps to develop and implement in situ management and conservation programs and report on them to the Secretariat. to develop conversion factors for all pangolin species that will enable the reliable determination of the number of animals associated with any quantity of pangolin scales seized, and identification material for identifying parts and derivatives of pangolins down to the species level. At AC33, the committee welcomed the report on in situ management and conservation programs from 5 range states. It further proposed new draft decisions in this regard in the annex to the present document. AC33 also agreed that the conversion parameters presented in the table in paragraph 12 of the document for 5 species can be used by parties in cases where national legislation demands that such information be provided for law enforcement and court purposes. However, for the remaining species, further work is still needed, and AC33 therefore submits a set of decision in annex to this document to finish that work. In relation to ID materials, AC33 invited parties to use the identification materials kindly submitted by the United States and Shark Guardian, and also agreed to prioritize pangolins in the mandate of the proposed Animals Committee Working Group on ID materials, should it be established after COP20. The Standing Committee is therefore invited to support the recommendation by the Animals Committee relating to the use of the conversion parameters presented in table in paragraph 2 for the 5 species in cases where national legislation demands that such information be provided for law enforcement and court purposes. B, encourage parties to use the identification materials available and review and submit the draft decisions in the annex to the present document for consideration at COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I turn to the Secretariat now to introduce document 67.2, and we will have a discussion on both of the documents together. Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. Document 67.2 addresses the implementation of the decision on pangolins and relevant paragraphs in Resolution Conf 17.10 Rev COP19 on conservation of and trade in pangolins. Following the notification to the parties issued in September 2024, 11 parties reported to the Secretariat on their control measures to secure pangolin stocks and the level of stocks as called for in Decisions 19.202 and in paragraph 3 of Resolution Conf 17.10 Rev COP19. In addition, the Secretariat has received information from China on their pangolin stocks. The responses from parties to the notification also included annual pangolin reports as called for in paragraph 4 of Resolution Conf 17.10 Rev COP19. The responses will further be analyzed to inform the comprehensive report on pangolins for COP20 in accordance with paragraph 13, paragraph A of Resolution Conf 17.10. The Standing Committee is invited to consider the recommendations in paragraph 28. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'd like to open up discussion on the recommendations contained in paragraph 22 of document 67.1 and the recommendations contained in paragraph 28 of document 67.2. And I open the floor to Standing Committee members. I open the floor to Observer Party. I have Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kenya is a range state of pangolins. And Madam Chair, we want to support recommendation 28B in SC 78 document 67.2. We concur that a comprehensive report on pangolins for COP20 prepared in accordance with paragraph 13A of Resolution Conf 1710 as revised at COP19 will provide the CITES Secretariat and COP20 with evidence facilitating development, informed discussion, and adoption of time-bound and measurable recommendations for parties. Madam Chair, importantly, this report will rely heavily on information provided by parties on measures taken to comply with Resolution COMP 1710. We therefore recommend further elements to Recommendation 28B, requesting parties and other stakeholders to submit relevant information to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Kenya. So you're proposing an amendment to 28B. I open the floor to observer parties. USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the recommendations in both documents, including the edit to Recommendation B and document the report from the Secretariat. I think it's the second document, 67.2. And if possible, during the discourse, can we hear the second recommendation to document 67.1 that Kenya just made again? I did not catch it. Thank you.
Kenya, can you please repeat your suggested amendment? I'll give you a few minutes and come back to you. Observer parties, observer organizations. I have EIA UK.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This intervention is on behalf of EIA and 9 other organizations whose names will be provided to the Secretariat. According to publicly available information, approximately 15 tons of pangolin scales were seized globally in 2024, representing an increase of almost 3 tons since 2023. Illegal trade in pangolins is thriving. Only 11 parties responded to the notification, and we note with concern that a number of other parties, which have repeatedly been flagged for ongoing illegal trade in pangolin scales, have failed to report despite the additional reminder from the Secretariat urging parties to annually submit reports in line with ResConf 17.10. We therefore support the amendments to paragraph 3 and 13A in ResConf 1710 as outlined in 67.2 Annex to align pangolin stockpile reporting with that of ivory and rhinoceros horn. We strongly urge parties, especially those which have recorded significant levels of illegal trade and seizure activity in recent years, to submit annual reports to the Secretariat and to continue reporting on their stockpile management in line with ResConf 1710. We strongly support the conclusion in paragraph 27 of the document 67.2 for the Secretariat to develop time-bound and measurable recommendations for consideration at COP20, and we urge the Standing Committee to agree to this. We suggest that this be appropriately reflected in paragraph 28B of the document. This would contribute to the effective implementation of ResConf 1710, especially in regard to the closure of legal domestic markets, which contribute to the illegal trade and fuel the poaching of pangolins. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I come to New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're alarmed at the scale of illegal trade of pangolins, and we align ourselves with Kenya that the recommendation should be time-bound and measurable in paragraph 28B. Thank you.
I will come back to Kenya if they wish to read their exact text for, I believe it is draft decision 20BB that they're wishing to amend based on what New Zealand said. Yeah. All right, I guess there's some confusion on my part. Kenya, when you read out your text, tell me specifically if it's paragraph 28, little b, which document, and then which paragraph and which recommendation.
May I proceed, Madam Chair? Sorry, I couldn't track the...
Sure, proceed.
That is 28B, request the Secretariat in its implementation of paragraph 13 of Resolution 1710 revised at COP19 to develop time-bound and measurable recommendations based on the most updated information available, directed to parties, and in bracket, which include range states, the transit countries, and consumer countries as appropriate.
So if the chair understands correctly, your only change to document 67.2 recommendation B is to add the phrase, because all the other language is still the same, to develop time-bound and measurable recommendations. Okay, I've got it now. I'll turn to China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China continues to support effective measures to conserve pangolins. As such, we have and will continue to implement strict regulations and to undertake extensive research and conservation efforts. These are detailed in S78 Inf. Doc 2. However, China observes that aggregated reporting on stockpile is not supported by the text of the Convention and its relevant provisions, and further, that previous reports on stockpiles have not supported conservation efforts. China also notes that stockpile management is a domestic issue of each country. China therefore has serious concern about the utility and precedent of providing information concerning summaries of stockpiles, and proposed to delete the phrase to use an aggregated summary of the pangolin stock declaration of the parties in paragraph 13A of draft amendments to ResConf 1710. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Any standing committee members wishing to speak to China's suggestion? Then I will consult with the Secretariat and see where we are. All right, I think this is where we are. On document 67.1, the Standing Committee agrees to recommendation A, B, and C, as in the document. I didn't hear any changes to that. And then when we move to document 67.2, the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendation in paragraph A, and the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendation in paragraph B as amended by Kenya. to reflect time-bound and measurable recommendations. And then I have the Standing Committee agreeing that decisions 18.238, 18.239, 19.200, 19.202, and 19.203 can be deleted. And then in regard to recommendation C, I haven't had any Standing Committee reaction.
About the paragraphs. 2 or 3 paragraphs 8.
Oh. Back to D on deleting decisions 19.203. It is just deletion of paragraphs A, B, E, and F. Okay, so we're back to C, where I haven't heard any. I heard support from some members of the Standing Committee. China proposed a text change, but I haven't heard any reaction from the Standing Committee to that. And I have Poland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to keep the text in the annex as it is in the presented document. Thank you very much.
I will take silence here or nodding heads on C, that based on what Poland said, that we agree with the recommendation as it was drafted, because I've not had anyone else propose support for changing it. I see nodding heads, and I think we can conclude then that we have accepted these recommendations. Thank you. And now we've caught up somewhat, and give me a chance to get my papers together, because I didn't think we would get this far, but we have. So thank you for your cooperation. I truly appreciate it. So that brings us to document 75. An assessment of the practicalities of the COP12 decision that the convention should apply to fungi, document 78, document 75, and this was submitted by the United Kingdom, so I call on the United Kingdom to introduce their document.
Thank you, Chair. At its 11th meeting, the Conference of the Parties agreed that species of fungi are covered by the Convention. Since COP12, there has been limited consideration of how this decision would apply in practice. We have submitted this document to return to this discussion, in particular to hear parties and others' views of how CITES could apply to fungi in practice and any concerns or challenges parties foresee. We think this is an important discussion to have now to inform future consideration of what steps, if any, may be necessary. We feel it is important for parties to collaborate together to identify and, if needed, address any concerns, especially prior to any potential listing proposal being brought forward by a party. We welcome any views shared now and, conscious of time following this meeting, and we're keen to work with any other interested parties to evaluate the feedback received following this meeting. To that end, we invite the Standing Committee to note this document and provide any feedback or concerns on the practical application of CITES for fungi to inform any future activities. Thank you.
So I will open up the discussion to Standing Committee members on this document. The UK is looking for feedback. I'll entertain some discussion so that they can get a sense of some of the feedback here, but I also would encourage you to be in touch with the United Kingdom Management Authority or Scientific Authority with your views, because I won't have a lengthy debate here. And I also have been assured that at COP12, the parties agreed that fungi could be covered by the convention, so that is not the type of information we're looking for here. We are looking not for recommendations, but views on this document as the UK presented it. So I open it to Standing Committee members, and I have quite a few. I have Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We recognize the importance of conservation efforts to protect living beings, including species of fungi. In this regard, we acknowledge that COP20 recognized that fungi are recovered by CITES. To this end, the implementation of Resolution 12.11 would be necessary, as outlined in the document. However, it's also important to highlight, as the document indicates, that since this COP decision, no proposals have been made to amend the CITES appendices to include any fungal species or taxa, despite the approximately 150,000 species currently described. Thus, Brazil believes that the first step should follow a bottom-up approach, which would be initially parts should identify endangered fungal species, and after gaining a clear understanding of the work required and its cost estimates to the Secretariat, they should begin to work on practical considerations outlined in paragraphs 9 to 14. So to this end, Brazil believes that is better, the best, most adequate way forward would be to have a concrete case, and after the concrete case being put forward by a party, we can discuss the issues mentioned paragraph 9 to 14. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brazil. New Zealand.
Oceania thanks the UK for authoring this paper. Regarding recommendations B and D, we would like to provide some views, but in the interest of time, we could provide the majority of these in writing if that is acceptable. Regarding paragraph 13 on nomenclature specialist, Dr. Tom May, an internationally recognized Australian fungi expert, has indicated that he would be willing to assist the Convention on fungi matters by providing ad hoc expert advice to the committees through his roles in international nomenclature and taxonomy organizations. If there is support from the Standing Committee for this type of ad hoc advice, an agreement could be further explored and potentially formalized with a follow-up paper to the 20th meeting of the Conference of Parties. Regarding recommendation C, considering the complexities of potential fungi listings, we see value in developing resolution text relating to the application of CITES to fungi as described in paragraph 15. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we're making any decisions here. I think the UK's noted your generous offer of having a world-renowned expert on fungi provide ad hoc advice, so I think they've noted that. Call on Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan would like to express its appreciation to United Kingdom for the preparation of this document. In Japan, from ancient times, the fruiting body of mushroom have been eaten, and its sustainable collection have been made it possible to preserve the fungi and its habitat. Regarding the recommendation in the paragraph 16 of this document, I'd like to make a comment on the recommendation B. When considering this issue, we believe that it's not practical to establish a fungi-specific committee equivalent to the Animals and Plants Committee, because it will become new financial and administrative burdens on the Secretariat and Member States. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. I have 3 more Standing Committee members wishing to speak, and then I think I may conclude discussion. I might ask for which parties have views, and the UK can bilaterally reach out to them to hear those views. So I will take Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. Kuwait believes that fungi exceed the Convention mandates. CITES was designed to regulate trade in endangered wild fauna and flora, not fungi, which is not originally included and will cause significant enforcement challenges. Fungi conservation is better addressed through specialized framework like CBD. expanding CITES to fungi would impose unnecessary administration and financial burden. Thank you, Chair.
I call on Poland.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, UK, for the document. As for recommendation B, we agree that there are open questions on practical considerations that should be answered to avoid issues down the line. Regarding committees, we would not be in support of a fungi committee, but would consider the joint sessions of animals and plant committees the appropriate forum to deal with fungi topics. Given that the in-person joint meeting is not always possible, or if fungi topics would become numerous, the plants committee could serve as the backup or even the final forum for historical reasons, because mycological expertise, for example, at universities, is mostly within botany departments. Regarding nomenclature specialists, given the limited expected need in the short and mid-term, even if fungi species should be listed, we would prefer the option of appointing an ad hoc expert to advise the committees. This might change if, for example, higher taxa listings are proposed. Animals and plants nomenclature specialists could be tasked to evaluate the needs. This option would limit the budgetary and workload implications. As for recommendation C, we are of the view that clarifications on how to deal with fungi should be specified in a resolution. However, we are not convinced that the separate new resolution is required, but would consider amendments to Resolution 18.2 on establishment of committees as the best option. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have Honduras, and then I will look for those observer parties who wanted to speak on this so that I can make a list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would agree with Kuwait. We think that all of this would have consequences for the future, and there is no scope for fungi under the CITES Convention unless that were to change, and that would possibly even involve a change in the name of the convention. So we're with Kuwait on this. Thank you.
Thank you for those views. I will again remind parties that a decision was taken at COP12 relating to the application of the convention to fungi. At COP12, they said the convention did cover fungi. So I just throw that back out there for your consideration. I have China and Mexico wishing to speak. I will take those two yet, but then I will cut off discussion and look for those countries that I have Indonesia as a standing committee member, but I really do not want a 45-minute, 30-minute debate on fungi, since we have other CITES matters that are listed species and we need to address. So I would prefer that we get some short interventions, and then the UK can note which countries wish to give views. So I will go to Indonesia, and then I think I will cut discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indonesia aligns with Brazil, Kuwait, and Japan in emphasizing the need for concrete case and consequences for the convention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will take Mexico yet, but then I will not take any other parties, and I will ask you if you have views, I will make a list, and the UK can reach out to you individually. Is that acceptable to the? Thank you, UK. So Mexico, you'll be the one observer party to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would agree with those who say that if they are to be included in the convention, we don't have any fungi listed in the appendices, so it's hard to know how they could be covered by the convention. There might be some, but we've never had a proposal. There is no species listed, so we don't really see any need to amend the resolution setting up committees. We would like to thank the UK for their report, but we really don't think that we need any specific fungi-related measures, and I don't think that we need to work on the nomenclature side of things either. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. I will take one observer organization, and I have China, I will let you speak if it's brief, because I said I would note the countries that have views and they can give them directly to the UK, because this is taking up more time than I would like.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to be short. And China acknowledges the importance of fungi conservation and appreciates the efforts of nomenclature committee at COP12. However, we believe involving CITES in fungi trade regulation at this stage is inappropriate. In general, China advocates a cautious and science-driven approach to fungi conservation rather than premature regulatory intervention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And now I will take the one-party observer organization, the Alliance in Canada for Animals Protection.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief. Just to say that I have been personally in touch with Dr. Gabriela Furci, who is a fungal specialist from Chile, who is extremely interested in seeing CITES turn its attention to fungi, and she actually has certain species you think might be appropriate for listing. But I would agree that until such time as a proposal comes forward, it is not an urgent matter. There are issues that may need to be addressed, such as source codes, how they're appropriate to an organism that reproduces by spores, for argument's sake. But I would like to at least see the convention keep a finger on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now look for those parties that had views and you didn't express them here. If you want to press your button, I'll make a list and I will give it to the UK. So if you had views on this one and you weren't heard, please press your button. And I will cut it off now. I have 3 parties, USA, Peru, and Tanzania. So UK, if you could note those and basically reach out to those parties and get their views. So to conclude this document, I would say the Standing Committee notes the document and invites parties to provide any feedback relating to implications relating to the application of the Convention to fungi, in particular the practical considerations, to submit them directly to the UK. And then I can conclude the document on fungi. Thank you. The reason I'm trying to get through this afternoon's agenda is that I know tomorrow we have many COM documents and I really want to allow for discussion of the COM documents, so I'm trying to keep us moving. So the next one is document 76 on annotations. Decision 16.162, document 78, document 76, and I turn to the working group chair, the UK, to introduce the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. At COP19, there was a decision to direct the Standing Committee to re-establish the working group on annotations in close collaboration with the Animals and Plants Committees. The Standing Committee is invited to note the advice provided by the working group in paragraphs 7 through 18 of the present document regarding annotations A10, annotation 14, annotation 11, annotation 12, annotation 4, and definitions in Resolution Conf 10.13 on implementation of the Convention for Tree Species and in the interpretation section of the appendices. The Standing Committee is invited to adopt recommendations 20A to E in the present document and the proposed changes set out in Annex 1 and 2 to this document. Additionally, the Secretariat has submitted an addendum to the document with draft decisions to be considered by the Standing Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to Standing Committee members. And again, the recommendations are contained in paragraph 20 of the document, and that's what I would like discussion to focus on. I will move to observer parties. Observer organizations. I have Canada.
Apologies, Chair. Canada supports the outcomes of the working group and agrees with the proposed recommendations. However, we have some comments for the draft decisions proposed by the Secretariat as written in the addendum. The draft decisions in the addendum does not merely delete the work that was completed, but directs new work to the annotations working group to simplify hash annotations 5, 6, and 17. While the working group noted they briefly discussed the possibility of grouping these annotations or assessing the benefit of harmonizing them for the species within the same genus, we think it is not necessary to direct this additional work as it is already in their mandate. We recommend the following portion of draft decision a, I should be deleted, particularly to assess the benefits of simplifying annotations #5, #6, and #17, or assessing the benefits of harmonizing annotations for the species within the same genus. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. We would support the intervention just made by our colleague from Canada. Additionally, while we note and concur with the working group's advice that it would be premature for the working group to take recommendations in paragraph 12 concerning annotations #11 and #12, that it would be premature to for the working group to take the recommendation forward unless range states are consulted prior to COP20. So we would recommend that the Standing Committee members, with the assistance of the Secretariat, could be asked to consult with the range states in their regions and report back in a manner that may allow for timely submission of an amendment proposal to help resolve this long-standing discussion at COP20. So this concerns annotations #11 and #12, just seeking an avenue for resolving it between now and COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? I will consult with the Secretariat on the way forward. On the suggestion by the U.S. in terms of consultation with the range countries, I'd like to get some reaction from the other standing committee members if that's the way forward that they want to go. I see Belgium nodding. I know we don't have Paraguay here. Does Argentina have any reaction to this as a range? I think they're a range country for this species. So while Argentina gives this some thought, I thought that might be helpful because you're asking for a consultation and it's workload resource issue for the Secretariat, and if the range countries don't really want to engage, it becomes difficult. So I think we basically, the Standing Committee accepts recommendation 20A, and in terms of paragraph B, that's accepted too. Paragraph C, recommendation C, the Standing Committee agrees to that. Well, yeah, that's the one we're still discussing. And then we get to recommendation D, in which case the Standing Committee agrees to move that recommendation forward as amended by Canada. Standing Committee agrees to paragraph D, and then can they agree to the amendment to the draft decision in 20XX that Canada made? I see nodding of heads, so the only thing outstanding is recommendation C, where the U.S. has suggested a change. Do I have any reaction from Argentina or other standing committee members if they support the change? Well, Belgium did support the change suggested by the U.S. All right, so simply we can change C to say invite feedback from the range states of Aniba, Rosadoria, and Bolnesia Samantoy on whether they can support the revisions to annotation 11 and 12 described in paragraph 12 of document SC 78, document 76. So they would be given an opportunity to provide feedback. And I have Argentina, and then I also see the U.S. requesting. So Argentina.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the case of Argentina, we are willing to work on this point, and we would be interested in setting up a working group and being part of said group. That is Argentina's position at this point.
No, there is no more time for working groups, and that's not the suggestion. Basically, the way the Secretariat will be contacting you for feedback on these two particular annotations and what's being proposed, and so you will have an opportunity to give feedback is what the U.S. is requesting. But I see the U.S. requesting the floor, so maybe they have another solution here.
Thank you, Chair. We are, as I noted, we have had these issues on the agenda for this working group for multiple intersessional periods and have really struggled to get range state engagement and responses to date. And so what it would be is an additional element to this recommendation to have the Standing Committee request the assistance of the relevant regional representatives to get this information with regard to these two annotations. So rather than putting the entirety of the workload on the Secretariat or simply inviting feedback, it would be to actively request assistance from the relevant regional representatives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, U.S. That's clearer what you're requesting. So I guess I look to the regional representatives. There are 3 for that area. If they can basically help get that feedback so that we can, you are right, this has been in the annotations working group for a long time without any resolution. So I look to Brazil if they can work with the range countries to get feedback that will help the Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Chair, sorry. Of course, we are always willing to cooperate and try to reach other members of our region. However, this issue is an issue that involves a specific country that we are having, mainly a specific country that we are having many we are not trying to connect. We are having some issues with regarding information to be received from all the members of the region. So we are very cautious on having such a responsibility, even though we recognize our role. Then what we can do is to have this as a request to the regional representative, but I would just include the word "if possible," so that we can respect the exchange of information process and not put a burden in ourselves if the country doesn't want to cooperate. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I have Argentina, and then I will propose a change to this paragraph.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following on from what our colleague from Brazil has just said, Argentina will contact Paraguay and Bolivia in order to be able to provide a response as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina, for doing that regional consultation. So C would now read: the Standing Committee requests the Standing Committee members with support from the Secretariat to obtain, if possible, and then the rest of the language would stay as is, feedback from the range states, ... So is that acceptable to the Standing Committee members? I see nodding heads, and I very much appreciate Argentina's offer to contact Bolivia and Paraguay to try to resolve this so that the annotation working group can proceed with work on this. Thank you, and we'll move on to the next item. All right, I would like to move on to agenda item 81, an informal review mechanism for existing and proposed annotations, decision 19.267, SC 78, document 81, and I call on the Secretariat to introduce this document.
Thank you, Chair. This document provides an update on the implementation of the decisions that the Chair just read out on the informal mechanism for existing and proposed annotations and presents a feasibility study in Annex 2. In paragraphs 23 to 25 of the document, the Secretariat proposes an approach to reviewing existing annotations. In paragraph 6, the Secretariat proposes an approach aimed at limiting or avoiding future implementation challenges related to new and/or amended annotations. The committee is invited to agree on the approach with respect to existing annotations and to submit the draft decision in Annex 1 of the document in this regard. The committee is further invited to agree to try the approach for annotations that are considered at COP20 and to request the Secretariat to report on this experience at its next regular meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I turn the Standing Committees to discussion of the recommendations contained in paragraph 28. I open it up to observer parties. I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the United States, we support taking note of the Secretariat's progress in implementing Decision 19.266 and the report contained in Annex 2 to this document. We also support the Secretariat's recommended approach to the review of existing annotations, but we suggest that the notification to the parties the Secretariat issues should remind parties that they are encouraged to bring challenges related to implementation, including with regard to the application of an annotation, to the attention of the Secretariat at any time, not simply in response to such a notification. The United States concurs with the conclusion that one of the main challenges to ensuring that an annotation is appropriate and can be readily implemented is with substantive annotations that are amended and adopted during negotiations at a COP. And we also recognize that such negotiations can offer opportunities and flexibilities to reach consensus on complex issues and advance species conservation. Although we have some concerns with regard to the introduction of a reflection period during a meeting of the Conference of the Parties, we do support piloting the approach outlined by the Secretariat in paragraphs 26 and 27 of the document following COP20 and for consideration by the Standing Committee during the next intersessional period. Finally, the United States concurs that decisions 19.266 and 19.267 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I look to observer parties. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have an addition we would like to see to recommendation C, to request the Secretariat to report back to the first Standing Committee after the COP so that we can see how things went at the COP with this test of this new system. And to give then the Standing Committee the mandate to make adjustments if needed. So this would be a new paragraph C to draft decision 20AA, which would be directed to the Secretariat. So that would be C, prepare a report to the first regular meeting of the committee following COP20 on the experience and any recommendations regarding the use of Rule 18 of the Rules of Procedure of the COP in the context of annotations. I think that was it. Apologies. So basically what we want to see is a recommendation so that the Secretariat can prepare a report to reflect on how things went during the COP, and that the Standing Committee can have a look at that and revise if necessary. And then we have just one note, because under recommendation B, if that is to go forward, this would then, in our understanding, create a working group on animals. And in the previous document, we talked about a working group on annotations, not being specified animals or plants. So we would suggest that it's made clear that we will have a working group on plants and another one on animals. Thank you.
I call on Canada.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be brief. Canada concurs with the views expressed by the United States and also the amendments and views from Belgium. We just wanted to add an additional reflection on the pilot test. In terms of the concept of the reflection period, we agree with having this pilot test, but we do caution that the use of this reflection period be at the discretion of the relevant committee chair, given their role in ensuring the smooth functioning of the meeting, and thus their assessment of whether or not such a reflection period would benefit or impede the smooth functioning of the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. I will call on any observer organization. Not seeing any. I will consult with the Secretariat. I think we have a way forward on this one. So I propose that the Standing Committee agree with recommendation 28A to take note. I see agreement from the Standing Committee to recommendation B. And then I would like to have some discussion because there was suggestion of them reporting back, but if you look at recommendation C in my consultation with the Secretariat, that's exactly what they're going to do when you look at recommendation C. So if that's not clear, then we can maybe finesse that language, but I don't think we need to add something additional. And then we would basically note the comments by Canada, Belgium, and the US in terms of the pilot project and others items. And then Standing Committee agrees to D, which is agrees that decisions 19.266 and 19.267 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. So that's my summary of where we are, and I look for nodding heads if that's a way forward, in particular to C. Looking at Belgium in particular, I see the US nodding that this would be satisfactory. I see others nodding, so I think we can conclude this, and I see Belgium now nodding. So I think we can conclude this one and move on to, we have 15 more minutes, so I know I'm pushing and I know we're all tired, but this will give us more time tomorrow. So I will move on to document 79. This one may need more discussion. Implications of the transfer of a species from one appendix to another. Decision 18.151, Rev Cop 19, SC 78, document 79, Rev 1. And this will be introduced by the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. This document summarizes progress made in the discussions on the question of the implications of the transfer of a species from one appendix to another, and presents the draft guidance and best practices related to periods of transition and possible transitory measures developed by the Secretariat pursuant to SC 77 recommendations. As indicated in the document, the Secretariat initially recommended that the Standing Committee consider the draft guidance and request the Secretariat to publish it on the CITES website after any amendments recommended by the Committee. However, considering the sensitivity of the topic and being cognizant of time, the Secretariat has also prepared a set of draft decisions that would allow for further consideration of this topic at AC 81. If the committee rather agrees with this second approach, the Standing Committee could today, A, take note of the draft guidance and best practices related to period of transition and possible transitory measures provided in annex to this document, B, request the chair of the Standing Committee in consultation with the Secretariat and taking into account any comments made by the committee to prepare draft decisions to be submitted at COP20 for further consideration of this draft guidance in the next intersessional period, and C, agree that decision 18.151 Rep COP19 has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. I can repeat the proposed new recommendations if needed. Yes? So the new recommendations, if the Standing Committee so agrees, would be A, to take note of the draft guidance provided in annex to this document. B, request the chair of the Standing Committee in consultation with the Secretariat and taking into account any comments made by the committee to prepare draft decisions to be submitted at COP20 for further consideration of this draft guidance in the next intersessional period. C, agree that decision 18.151 Rev COP19 has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I open the floor to Standing Committee members, and I have Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Brazil has had many administrative issues with other countries when the Cumarus and the trumpet trees entered into Appendix 2. The different interpretation from importer and exporter when it comes to exact date of entry into force have put in danger important commercial transactions. We believe that it's important that the import country consider the entry in force in the territory of the exporting country so as to take into consideration the and shipments duration. Brazil completely agree with the new proposition of the Secretariat and hopes to work together with all on this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the new approach, and we would like to make some comment for the current proposal. We don't agree with the small b as it is, and also small f. Small b just require additional procedure and not provide any practical solution for the matter of change during transportation. It encourages parties to agree on the procedure to implement, but it is not clear what can be the option. Is there any solution other than the current practices in paragraph 12, A or B? Both are mentioned having drawbacks. There should be some feasible options. As for small f, inventory stockpiles of specimens of species concerned by the amendment required for the purpose of export. From the practical viewpoint, at that stage, owners of the stockpiles, especially for private owners, usually doesn't aware about the CITES well, and it is difficult to distinguish their stockpile for export from those for domestic trade. Consequently, it is quite difficult to obtain the reliable data concerning the stockpile, and planning without reliable data is quite inefficient. As such, we believe the provision of small f is not appropriate as the best practice. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are happy with the suggested way forward as just presented by the Secretariat to prepare draft decisions so after the COP the work can continue, and we have the same preferred option as outlined by Brazil if we look at the two options that are in the present elements for guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. We'd agree with Brazil that this is an important issue that we need to get right, and we support the new approach to take this forward intercessionally. Thank you.
Have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the North America region, we appreciate the Secretariat's efforts to develop draft guidance concerning the obligations of parties related to the period of transition of a species from one appendix to another, and we consider the guidance included in document SC 78, Doc 79 as a good first step. We are somewhat disappointed that the consultation with the Plants Committee on tree species with annotation #5 or other annotated plant species was not able to occur, and also that the recommendations do not go much further than advising parties to liaise bilaterally as early as possible to agree on a way forward. We also note paragraph 16D in the non-binding guidance in the annex to the document, where it advises that permits should be valid only until the date that the new listing enters into effect. However, the document does not provide clear guidance on how parties could deal with circumstances related to documents such as certificates of ownership, musical instrument certificates, and traveling exhibition certificates issued before the adoption of a proposal at a COP, given that the period of validity for those certificates can be up to 3 years. We also note the need for similar guidance for cases where a trade suspension is put into effect. Therefore, in addition to the recommendations in the document, we recommend that the Standing Committee request the Secretariat to prepare for consideration at COP20 updated draft guidance and also prepare draft amendments to Resolution COP 12.3 to provide consistent long-term guidance by expressly including both the recommendation that pre-convention certificates may be issued prior to the entry into force date of a species newly added to the appendices, and the narrow circumstances under which a retrospective document may be issued to address shipments legally exported prior to the entry into force date, but arriving at the port of import after the entry into force date without the necessary CITES documents. If our recommendation is supported, we would look to the Secretariat to determine where best to place such text, but we consider that the 2 points could be captured with an amendment to Section 5 regarding pre-convention certificates and Section 14 regarding retrospective issue of permits and certificates, respectively. We also recommend the Standing Committee request the Secretariat to prepare draft amendments to paragraph 3 of Resolution Comp 13.6 to incorporate the recommendations regarding necessary measures to prevent excessive acquisition of species included in Appendix 2 as long-term guidance. This would be in addition to the existing text in the resolution concerning Appendix 1 specimens. Finally, we can support the observations and suggestions by the Secretariat in Brazil. Thank you, Chair.
I call on Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the Secretariat for the development of the draft guidance and best practices related to periods of transition and possible transitory measures provided in the annex of the document. We support new approach suggested by the Secretariat, and we share also the proposals made by the U.S. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I please ask the interpreters again to indulge me with an extra 10 minutes, because I think we can wrap this up today.
Yes, Chair, of course.
Thank you for your understanding, interpreters. I'll open it up to a few interventions by observer parties, because I think I have a sense of the Standing Committee's thoughts here. I have Israel, China, and Peru, and I will close the list then to observer parties.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, in addition to the types of changes that the U.S. would like to see, we would also like to point out that when Appendix 2 species changes to Appendix 1, now all of a sudden it needs also an import permit, which it didn't need before. And this change is not really reflected in how to deal with that kind of a change. So we would like to see that also taken into account as one of the principles and issues that need to be addressed as we move forward. So we would support the Chair's idea, to bring this forward as was suggested, but we'd like to include more guidance. Thank you.
China.
Thank you, Chair. China sees the merits of constantly reviewing and revising guidance in practice to enhance its applicability. For this reason, we support the Secretariat's draft recommendation and additional decisions considering the feedback at this meeting as a way forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Peru.
Gracias, señor. Thank you very much, Chair. Very briefly, we join the comments made by the United States, and we think it's important that we have scenario put forward for these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. I open it to observer organizations. I have the International Wood Products Association.
Thank you, Chair. I make this intervention on behalf of IWPA and ATIBT. We seek to highlight the real negative consequences of the ongoing lack of consensus among parties on the status of CITES permitting requirements for shipments during periods of transition, especially when species are added to the CITES appendices. Transportation of high-volume wood products such as lumber, veneer, and plywood predominantly relies on ocean and rail freight, with shipments often taking multiple weeks or months to reach the country of importation. Even as our industry has worked to ensure pre-convention shipments arrive well before the implementation date of a new listing, the realities of international logistics mean that products shipped weeks and months in advance of this date can and sometimes do arrive afterwards. Disagreement between source and destination parties on whether a permit is necessary for products shipped before the implementation date can therefore lead to significant financial damage for our industry. While we understand that each country applies its own national regulations, we deplore the significant, often unjustified discrepancies between these regulations. These discrepancies have major repercussions on our sector and hamper the development of sustainable trade. For example, following the recent CITES listings of species such as rosewood, kaya, and others, the parties involved in exporting and importing did not agree on when permits became mandatory or on the need to obtain them, generating confusion and trade barriers. We urge parties to work collaboratively in the lead up to COP20 to finally address this unnecessary inconsistency that negatively impacts stakeholders who are committed to compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will now consult with the Secretariat in the hopes of summing this up. I've heard a lot of support for the advice by the Secretariat and the guidance, and so this is what I would like to report out. The Standing Committee, A, takes note of the draft guidance and best practices related to periods of transition and possible transitory measures provided in Annex to this document. B, Standing Committee requests the Chair in consultation with the Secretariat to prepare draft decisions to be submitted at COP20 for further consideration of this topic at SC 81, taking into account any comments made at this meeting. The Standing Committee C agrees that Decision 18.151, Rev COP 19, has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. Note, the Standing Committee notes the comments for Brazil, Japan, Belgium, USA, Israel, China, Peru, and others taking the floor. So I look to the Standing Committee if we can agree to these three items. I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you please read recommendation B again?
Sure. B, requests the Standing Committee Chair in consultation with the Secretariat to prepare draft decisions to be submitted at COP20 for further consideration of this topic at SC 81, taking into account any comments made at this meeting. I see the U.S. nodding they can't agree with this. I will give it, can the U.S. give us a rationale with their concerns?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. We've heard from industry, and we need a solution now, at least to make progress on this instead of kicking it to the next intersessional period. We provided a few ways forward with updating resolutions that sort of codify some of these practices that parties have been using for these transitory periods, and we'd like some guidance to be considered at COP20 that has an actual way forward instead of continuing to discuss it in the next intersessional period.
Thank you, U.S. I think we heard your concerns. I also heard other Standing Committee members saying this needs more time. So I look to the Standing Committee members again for how they want to proceed here. Are they looking for decisions and guidance at COP20 for a solution, or can they accept the way I read out recommendation B? All right, I will take Japan yet, and then I think we've revised these yet again based on the concerns just heard, but I'll take Japan.
Sorry, we just support the U.S. position. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. So let me try again. The Standing Committee and little a would now read, submit for consideration at COP20 the draft guidance and best practices related to periods of transition and possible transitory measures provided in the annex to this document. B would request the chair in consultation with the Secretariat to prepare draft decisions to be submitted at COP20 for further consideration of this topic at SC 81, taking into account any comments made at this meeting. So essentially, A would allow the guidance to go forward and the parties would discuss that at COP20. B gives you a decision that, dependent upon what happens at COP20 in those discussions, could continue the work. And then C, I don't see any disagreement with C. So I look to the U.S. for a reaction if they can accept this way forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we're getting close. We would like in recommendation A to consider updated draft guidance, taking into consideration the concerns expressed by parties and industry during SC 78, and we can have a revised draft guidance to consider at COP20, and then we can have the draft decisions in recommendation B to continue the discussions in the next intersessional period.
Thank you, U.S. That's clear. And so basically A would read, submit for consideration at COP20 updated draft guidance and best practices related to periods of transition and possible transitory measures provided in the annex to this document. And we are noting, the Standing Committee is noting the comments from Brazil, Japan, Belgium, USA, Israel, China, Peru, and others during this plenary discussion. So that will be taken into account in revising this updated draft guidance for COP20. So is that a way forward to the Standing Committee? I see nodding heads, and thank you on the resolution of this one. And I'm going to turn to the Secretariat for housekeeping. My understanding is there are not any working groups this evening. I would urge you all to get some rest, and I'm sure the Standing Committee housekeeping will remind you to look at where you can find the COM documents, but I really urge you to look at use the time this evening to look at your COM documents so we can have an efficient discussion tomorrow. We've made up some time. We may yet get through this agenda.
Thank you, Chair. The only housekeeping announcement that I have is that we will start tomorrow with agenda item 44 on Jaguars, and we'll continue on with the remainder of the agenda items as we have at the moment. So we will start with agenda item 82, 83, and then it'll continue on. As we have done today, this afternoon, we will put on the screen in the morning how the order of the working program will be, but it should be in the order at which we have the agenda items in the working program at the moment. Thank you.